The bus rattled along the cracked asphalt of Route 17, its engine groaning like a beast on its last breath. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of sweat-soaked seats and stale coffee from a nearby diner spill. It was late afternoon, the kind where the sun dipped low and painted everything in harsh, unforgiving gold. Sister Amelia clutched her worn leather satchel to her chest, her habit slightly askew from the day's rounds at the shelter. She was a small woman, her face etched with lines from years of quiet service, but her eyes held a fire that no amount of humility could dim. She had boarded in the dusty outskirts of Milford, heading back to the convent after delivering supplies to families forgotten by the system. The trouble started at the next stop. 3 men piled on, rough types, clad in faded denim jackets patched with crude logos, their boots caked in mud from whatever back-alley dealings had occupied their morning. They were loud, reeking of cheap whiskey and entitlement, the kind of men who thrived on the bus's anonymity. One, with a shaved head and a scar twisting across his cheek, spotted Sister Amelia first. "Hey, nun lady," he slurred, leaning into her space as the bus lurched forward. "You got any of that holy water for a sinner like me, or you just here to judge?" The other 2 chuckled, crowding closer, their shadows swallowing the light filtering through the grimy windows. The passengers shifted uncomfortably, office workers averting eyes, a mother pulling her child nearer, but no one spoke. Sister Amelia straightened, her voice steady as a prayer. "I'm just trying to get home, gentlemen. Please give me space." But the scarred one didn't back off. He jabbed a finger at her satchel. "What's in there? Donations? Bet you'd share with the right folks." His hand shot out, grabbing the strap, yanking it toward him. The bus hit a pothole and she stumbled, the satchel ripping open just enough to spill papers, reports she knew on the corruption she'd been quietly gathering for months. Bribes at the town hall, shelters defunded to line pockets, evidence that could topple the mayor's cronies if only someone listened. The harassment escalated. The second man, burly with tattoos snaking up his neck, pressed against her arm, his breath hot and foul. "Come on, sister, lighten up, we're just having fun." The third blocked her escape, smirking as he whispered something crude that made the air feel heavier. Sister Amelia's face paled, but she didn't cry out. She never did. In her world, silence was often the first weapon against chaos. Yet the bus rolled on, indifferent, the other riders frozen in that collective paralysis where fear masquerades as apathy. A young woman in the back row bit her lip, wanting to intervene but chained by doubt. An elderly man gripped his cane tighter, muttering under his breath. Then, from the rear of the bus came the creak of leather. Caleb Knox Ward had been riding in silence. His massive frame squeezed into a seat, meant for someone half his size. He was a Hell's Angel, or at least he had been, patched out years ago after the war chewed him up and spat him back into civilian life. Now he was just Knox, a mechanic with grease under his nails and ghosts in his eyes. His kuta hung over the seat back, faded black with the old club insignia, a reminder of promises made in foxholes and broken on home soil. He'd boarded in Harlan, heading nowhere particular, just chasing the hum of the road to drown out the nightmares. The cut on his knuckles from a recent shop scuffle still throbbed, but it was nothing compared to the ache of old wounds. Knox watched the scene unfold in the reflection of the window, his jaw tightening like a coiled spring. He'd seen enough bullies in his life, drill sergeants, gang enforcers, even his own reflection on bad days. But this, harassing a nun on a public bus? It stirred something deep, an echo of the oath he'd sworn to his fallen brother. Watch for the ones who can't fight back. He rose slowly, the bus's sway doing nothing to hurry him. At 6'4", broad as a barn door, his presence filled the aisle like a shadow stretching at dusk. Boots thudding softly on the sticky floor, he moved forward, parting the crowd without a word. The thugs noticed him last, their laughter faltering as he loomed. "Is there a problem, sister?" Knox's voice was low, gravelly from years of shouting over motorcycle roars and artillery fire. It cut through the din like a knife, calm but unyielding. Sister Amelia looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes, but she nodded once, regaining her composure. The scarred man spun, sizing Knox up with a sneer. "Mind your business, freak. This ain't got nothing to do with you." Knox didn't flinch. He stood there, arms loose at his sides, but his gaze pinned the man like a spotlight. The bus seemed to hold its breath, the engine's rumble fading into tense silence. For the first time that afternoon, the power shifted, not to fists or threats, but to the quiet stand of one man against the tide. The burly one stepped forward, chest puffed. "You deaf? Walk away." Knox's eyes never left Sister Amelia, who was gathering her papers with trembling hands. "She asked for space," he said simply. "You gonna give it?" The third thug muttered something about 1 against 3, but doubt crept into his voice. Knox could feel the weight of the passengers' stares now, a ripple of hope cutting through the fear. He wasn't looking for a fight. Wars had taught him that violence was a poor teacher, but he'd be damned if he let this slide. In his pocket, his old dog tags pressed against his thigh, a talisman of loyalties long buried. This moment, he sensed, was no accident. It was a call, pulling him from the shadows. The scarred man shoved Knox's shoulder, testing, "Or what? You gonna pray us away?" Laughter bubbled up again, but it rang hollow. Knox didn't move, his frame absorbing the push like an oak in wind. "No prayers needed," he replied, voice steady. "Just your feet taking you to the back." Sister Amelia placed a hand on his arm, light as a feather. "Thank you," she whispered, her accent carrying the lilt of old-world faith. In that touch, Knox felt the stir of something forgotten, a purpose beyond the garage and the endless highway. The bus slowed for the next stop, brakes hissing like a warning. The thugs exchanged glances, weighing their odds. Outside, the desert stretched endless, but inside, a line had been drawn. As the doors wheezed open, the scarred man spat on the floor. "This ain't over, none. Or you, big man." They backed off, slinking toward the exit. But Knox knew better. Men like that didn't forget. They festered. He helped Sister Amelia to her feet, her satchel secured now. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, eyes searching his face. "More than all right. God sends angels in leather sometimes." The other passengers murmured approval, a few even clapping softly as the bus emptied. Knox sat back down, heart pounding not from adrenaline, but from the dawning realization. Those papers she'd dropped, he'd glimpsed words like embezzlement and shelter funds. This wasn't just harassment. It was the tip of something rotten in Milford. By the time the bus pulled away, dust kicking up in golden clouds, Knox stared out at the fading horizon. His phone buzzed in his pocket, an old number from the club, a voice he hadn't heard in years. "Knox, you still ride for the promise?" The words hit like thunder. He glanced at Sister Amelia, now seated across from him, clutching her satchel like a shield. Whatever she'd uncovered, it smelled of the corruption that had claimed his brother's life back in the service. Honor demanded he listen. And just like that, a lone biker found himself on the edge of a fight bigger than any road he'd traveled. The bus lumbered onward, its tires humming a monotonous dirge against the sun-baked road. Dust devils swirled in the rearview mirrors, chasing the fading light as the horizon bled into twilight hues of bruised purple and amber. Inside, the air had shifted, thicker now, laced with the faint metallic tang of tension uncoiling. Sister Amelia sat across from Knox, her fingers tracing the edges of her satchel like a rosary, the spilled papers tucked safely away. She glanced at him occasionally, her eyes soft but probing, as if weighing the stranger who'd become her unexpected guardian. Knox leaned back, his broad shoulders pressing against the worn vinyl, the creak of his leather jacket echoing in the quiet. The other passengers had settled into murmurs, stealing looks his way, but the immediate storm had passed. For now, Knox's phone vibrated again in his pocket, insistent, like a heartbeat refusing to fade. He fished it out, the screen glowing dimly with an unknown number. Harlan area code, a ghost from the old days. He hesitated, thumb hovering, but the pull was too strong. Answering felt like cracking open a door he'd bolted shut years ago. "Ward," he said, voice low to not disturb the fragile peace. The line crackled, then a familiar rasp cut through. "Knox? That you, brother? It's Razor. Been too damn long." Razor, real name Eddie Harlan, the club's former sergeant-at-arms, the one who'd pulled Knox from the rubble in that godforsaken desert outpost. His voice carried the gravel of too many smokes and regrets, but it stirred the embers Knox had tried to bury. "Heard you were drifting Route 17, figured you'd pick up." Knox's grip tightened on the phone, the plastic warm against his calloused palm. Outside, the landscape blurred, scrubby mesquite giving way to the skeletal outlines of abandoned oil rigs, relics of Milford's faded glory. "What do you want, Razor? I hung up the Kuta. You know why." The words tasted bitter, laced with the memory of his brother Jake, lost not to bullets, but to the greed of stateside suits who'd skimmed supply lines until good men starved. Jake's last letter, crumpled in Knox's wallet even now, had ended with a promise. "Watch for the weak ones, Cal. That's our oath." Razor chuckled, low and knowing. "Yeah, I know. But promises don't die easy, do they? Word spreading about trouble in Milford. Shelters closing, folks on the street, same rot that got Jake, and now this nun's stirring the pot, handing out papers like gospel truth. You see it yet?" Knox's eyes flicked to Sister Amelia. She met his gaze, unblinking, as if she'd heard every word through the ether. The bus hit a seam in the road, jolting them both, and in that sway, she leaned forward slightly. "Pardon the intrusion," she said softly, her voice carrying the gentle cadence of someone who'd faced tempests with folded hands. "But if you're speaking of the troubles here, perhaps it's no coincidence we crossed paths." He muted the phone, the world narrowing to her face, wrinkles like roadmap lines from a life of quiet battles. "You know who that is?" Knox asked. Though he already sensed the threads weaving tighter, she nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "The road whispers. I've been praying for allies, Mr. Ward, those men on the bus. They're not random. They're enforcers for Mayor Hale's crew. The papers you saw, records of funds diverted, meant for the homeless, the veterans like you. Instead, they vanish into pockets. I've tried the authorities, the church channels, but voices like mine get drowned out." Knox unmuted, Razor's breathing steady on the line. "She's right here," Knox said. Spilling about corruption, Hale's name came up. A pause, then Razor's tone hardened, the sound of wind whipping in the background. "He was on a bike somewhere out there." "Told you. Club's hearing echoes. Some old brothers talking about riding in, honoring the code. Jake's code. You in, Knox, or you still running from shadows?" The question hung, heavy as the gathering dusk outside. Knox stared at the passing telephone poles, their wires humming like distant warnings. Memories flooded unbidden. Jake's laugh in the barracks, the promise scrawled in blood-smeared ink after a convoy ambush. "For the forgotten," Jake had said. "We ride for them." Knox had walked away after the funeral, the club's endless cycles of loyalty and loss, too close to the war's echo. But here, on this rattling bus with a nun's quiet fire beside him, it felt like the road had circled back. "I'm listening," Knox replied finally, the words scraping out like gravel under tires. "Tell me more." Sister Amelia shifted, pulling a single sheet from her satchel, a faded printout, edges frayed from handling. "It started small," she began, her voice weaving through the engine's drone. "Donations missing from the shelter, then families evicted, no recourse. I documented it all, thinking truth would prevail, but last week, a whistleblower, a clerk at town hall, disappeared. Left signs of a struggle, nothing more. Those men today, They were warning me to stop. Knox took the paper, his eyes scanning names and figures under the dim overhead light. Hale's signature looped like a noose at the bottom. The bus slowed, pulling into a roadside stop where fluorescent bulbs buzzed over a cluster of pumps, the smell of diesel seeping through the vents. Passengers stirred, but Knox stayed put, the paper crumpling slightly in his fist. "This, Clark," he said. "Anyone looking?" She shook her head, eyes shadowed. "The police? They're in Hale's pocket. But you—" "I saw how you stood, like a promise kept." Razor's voice broke in. "Meet us at the old Crossroads diner, Dawn. Bring the nun. We'll talk crew. For Jake." Knox ended the call, the silence settling like dust after a storm. He handed the paper back, his mind racing with the weight of it all. The brother's ghost, the nun's burden, the faint rumble of brotherhood calling from the horizon. "You got a fight on your hands, sister, bigger than a bus." She placed her hand over his, brief and steady. "And you've just joined it. God, or fate, doesn't send help without reason." As the bus pulled away from the stop, stars pricking the velvet sky, Knox felt the old fire kindle. The road ahead twisted toward Milford, where corruption festered like an open wound. He wasn't patched in anymore, but promises. They rode eternal. The engine growled on, carrying them into the night where loyalty would demand its due. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The night deepened as the bus carved through the ink-black ribbon of Route 17, its headlights slicing fleeting paths through the scrubland. Stars wheeled overhead like distant campfires. Indifferent to the drama unfolding below, Knox stared out the window, the glass cool against his forehead, reflecting fragments of his scarred profile back at him. The engine's steady thrum vibrated through his bones, a mechanical lullaby that did little to quiet the storm in his chest. Sister Amelia dozed lightly beside him, her head nodding with each sway, the satchel cradled in her lap like a sacred relic. The papers inside, those damning ledgers of stolen hope, burned in Knox's mind. Each entry a betrayal of the fragile trust people placed in their town. He shifted, the leather of his jacket whispering against the seat, and pulled Jake's old letter from his wallet. The paper was yellowed, edges frayed from years of folding and unfolding. The ink faded, but the words sharp as ever. "Cal, when the suits turn on their own, you stand for the rest. Promise me." Knox's thumb traced the signature, feeling the ghost of his brother's grip. Jake had died not in the heat of battle, but in the cold calculus of cut supplies, meds withheld, routes rerouted for profit. The club had rallied then, but Knox had walked away, convinced loyalty was just another chain. Now, with the diner's neon sign flickering on the horizon like a beacon, doubt gnawed at him. Was this redemption, or just another road to ruin? The bus hissed to a stop at the crossroads, brakes squealing under the weight of weary travelers. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as it pulled into the lot of the Last Chance Diner, a squat building with peeling paint and a sign buzzing erratically in the pre-dawn chill. The air outside carried the bite of desert cold, mingled with the oily scent of frying bacon wafting from the vents. Knox stood first, offering Sister Amelia a steady hand. She took it, her grip firm despite her slight frame, and they stepped down into the gravel, boots sinking slightly into the frost-kissed earth. A few other passengers disembarked, casting curious glances before scattering toward waiting cars, but Knox felt exposed, like a target painted in the sodium glow. Inside the diner, the warmth hit like a blanket. Steam rising from coffee pots, the sizzle of eggs on the griddle, and the low murmur of night shift talk. Formica counters gleamed under fluorescent lights, and a jukebox in the corner hummed a forgotten country tune about lost highways. Razor was already there, sprawled in a booth at the back, his salt and pepper beard framing a face etched with the same war-worn lines as Knox's. He wore a faded kuta, the club's winged skull patch, catching the light like a badge of forgotten battles. Two other bikers flanked him, Tank, a mountain of a man with a prosthetic arm that gleamed silver, and Lena, a sharp-eyed mechanic who'd patched more than engines in her time with the crew. They nodded as Knox approached, the air thickening with unspoken history. "Knox," Razor said, sliding a mug of black coffee across the table. Steam curled up, carrying the bitter aroma that cut through the diner's grease. "You made it, and brought the firebrand." His eyes flicked to Sister Amelia, respect flickering in their depths. She slid into the booth beside Lena, who offered a quiet smile, the kind shared among women who'd stared down worse than corrupt mayors. Knox sat, the vinyl creaking under his weight, and accepted the coffee. It scalded his tongue, grounding him. "Talk," he said simply, his voice a low rumble that matched the idling Harleys outside, their chrome glinting under the lot's lamps. Razor leaned in, elbows on the scarred tabletop, the scent of motor oil clinging to him like cologne. Milford's rotting from the inside. Hale's been skimming shelter funds for years. Vets like us ending up on the streets while he builds that fancy lodge for his cronies. The nun here's got proof, but it's buried under threats. That clerk who vanished? Word is, Hale's boys roughed him up, left him somewhere the coyotes handle the rest. No bodies turned up, just whispers. Sister Amelia unfolded a map from her satchel, her fingers steady as she traced lines in faded ink. The shelters on Elm Street, heart of the old district. Funds meant for families like those you served with, Mr. Ward, diverted to private accounts. I've spoken to the bishop, the press, but they fear reprisal. Those men on the bus, they're just the muscle. Hale pulls the strings. Tank grunted, his prosthetic whirring softly as he flexed it. "We ride for promises, Knox, Jake's included. Clubs scattered since you left, but echoes remain. 10 of us could show at dawn, make noise at the town hall. Not fists, flags, voices. Force the light on the dark." Knox's jaw tightened, the coffee turning sour in his gut. He remembered the last ride, the one that ended in a raid gone wrong. Brothers lost to the same greed that festered here. And if it blows back, Hale's got badges on payroll. We end up like that clerk. Lena met his gaze, her voice cutting through like a revving engine. "Then we stand anyway. Family chosen, remember? You walked for a reason, but this honors what Jake died protecting." The words landed heavy, stirring the embers. Outside, a lone coyote yipped in the distance, the sound echoing Knox's inner howl. Sister Amelia placed a hand on the table, her habit sleeve brushing the map. "It's not about storming gates," she said softly. "It's about truth breaking through. I've carried this alone too long. With you, it feels like grace." Razor slid a key across the table. An old motel fob nearby, a safe spot to regroup. "Dawn ride or not, you're in the wind now. Hale's meeting at the lodge tomorrow. We crash it quiet, hand out copies of her papers. Let the town see." Knox pocketed the key, the metal cool against his palm, feeling the weight of oaths old and new. The diner clock ticked toward 4, the sky outside paling to indigo. He nodded once, the decision settling like dust after a long haul. For Jake. Or for the forgotten. As they rose, the door jingled, admitting a gust of chill wind that rattled the windows. The crew filed out, engines roaring to life in the lot, deep, throaty growls that vibrated the ground. Knox lingered with Sister Amelia, watching the bikes form a loose convoy under the emerging stars. The road to Milford stretched ahead, twisted with shadows, but for the first time in years, Knox felt the pull of purpose, not chains. Promises, it seemed, had a way of revving back to life, carrying the faithful into the fray. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon like a hesitant promise, painting the sky in strokes of pale rose and steel grey. The convoy of Harleys rumbled out of the diner's lot, their engines a symphony of low growls and popping exhausts that shattered the desert's hush. Knox rode point on his old ironhead, the wind whipping at his face, carrying the sharp tang of sagebrush and cooling earth. Sister Amelia was tucked safely in the sidecar Razor had rigged up years ago for just such runs, her habit fluttering like a flag of defiance against the rush. Behind them, Tank and Lena flanked the group, their bikes weaving in formation, chrome flashing in the emerging sun. The road to Milford unspooled ahead, a cracked vein through forgotten hills, each mile pulling Knox deeper into the gravity of oaths he'd tried to outrun. His mind churned with the diner's echoes, Razor's gravelly resolve, Lena's steady gaze, the map's accusing lines tracing Hale's web of deceit. The shelter on Elm Street loomed in his thoughts, a beacon for the lost souls Jake had fought to protect. Knox throttled down, the vibration thrumming through his gloves, syncing with the pulse of memory. Jake's letter, now refolded in his pocket, felt heavier, as if the words had gained weight overnight. Stand for the rest. It wasn't just a brother's plea anymore. It was the thread binding this unlikely crew, from scarred veterans to a nun's unyielding faith. They crested a rise, and Milford came into view, a sprawl of weathered clapboard and neon signs huddled against the Badlands, its main drag stirring with early risers. The air thickened with the scent of fresh asphalt from overnight repairs and the faint, acrid bite of wood smoke from distant chimneys. Knox signalled a pull-off at the edge of town, where a cluster of cottonwoods offered scant shade. The bikes idled down to a purr, dust settling in lazy swirls around their tires. Sister Amelia dismounted first, smoothing her habit with hands that betrayed no tremor. "The shelter's 2 blocks east," she said, pointing toward a row of sagging storefronts. "We should see the damage firsthand before Hale's gathering." Razor nodded, killing his engine with a flick of the wrist. "Smart, eyes open, no charging in blind. Hale's lodge is across town, but his eyes are everywhere." Tank lumbered off his ride, the prosthetic arm catching the light like polished armor, while Lena scanned the street, her ponytail whipping in the breeze. They moved as a unit, boots crunching on gravel, the group's presence drawing sidelong glances from a milk truck driver and a pair of joggers who quickened their pace. Milford woke slowly, its pulse lazy under the sun's climb. But Knox felt the undercurrent, a wariness in the air, like the town held its breath against intruders. The shelter was a squat brick building wedged between a pawnshop and a boarded-up pharmacy, its sign faded to Hope Haven in peeling letters. Chain-link fencing ringed the lot, topped with barbed wire that glinted menacingly. As they approached, the sounds hit first. Muffled voices from within, the clatter of pots in a makeshift kitchen, and the distant wail of an infant echoing off the walls. Sister Amelia pushed through the gate, her steps purposeful, and Knox followed, the crew fanning out like shadows. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the mingled odors of canned soup and unwashed linens. Makeshift cots lined the common room, occupied by hollow-eyed families. Veterans with bandaged limbs, single mothers clutching threadbare blankets, children drawing on scraps of paper with borrowed crayons. A volunteer, a wiry woman with grey-streaked hair, looked up from a ledger at the front desk, her face lighting with recognition. "Sister Amelia, we weren't expecting you so early. The heat's out again. Funds cut last month." Her voice cracked, eyes darting to the newcomers with a mix of hope and suspicion. Sister Amelia introduced them quietly, her words weaving a bridge of trust. "These are friends, Maria, here to help shine light on the shadows." Knox's gaze swept the room, landing on a cluster of men in the corner, older vets, their tattoos faded echoes of service, huddled over a card game that did little to mask their despair. One, with a prosthetic leg propped on a crate, met Knox's eyes, a flicker of brotherhood passing unspoken. It stirred the knot in Knox's gut, the same one that had twisted after Jake's death, when the system that promised care delivered only crumbs. He knelt by a young boy staring out a cracked window, his small hands pressed against the glass. "What's out there worth watching?" Knox asked softly. The boy turned, eyes wide but guarded. "Nothing much. Used to be a playground, but they tore it down for some big shots parking lot." The words hung, simple yet slicing, revealing the rot's reach. Sister Amelia joined them, kneeling beside the child with a gentle touch. "We'll fix that, little one. Promises are being kept today." Outside, as the group regrouped, Razor pulled Knox aside near the fence, the metal warm from the rising sun. "See it? This is what Hale's stealing. Jake would have burned rubber for this place." Knox nodded, the conviction settling deeper. But doubt lingered, a whisper of old scars, the raid that cost brothers, the betrayal that drove him from the club. "What if standing means falling again?" he murmured, voice lost in the breeze rustling the leaves. Razor clapped his shoulder, the grip ironclad. "Then we fall together. That's the code." Lena approached, holding a folded flyer from the shelter, another plea for donations ignored. "Hale's meeting starts at noon. We ride in quiet, distribute these with Amelia's papers. Let the truth rev the engines." Sister Amelia overheard, her expression resolute. "Not violence, but visibility. The town needs to remember honor isn't dead." The crew mounted up, engines coughing to life once more, the roar echoing off the buildings like a declaration. As they pulled away, Knox glanced back at the shelter, the faces in the windows blurring into a mosaic of need. The road to the lodge wound through Milford's heart, past the town hall's marble facade and Hale's gleaming offices, where corruption hid in plain sight. They arrived at the lodge's perimeter by mid-morning, a sprawling timbered estate on the town's outskirts, ringed by manicured lawns that mocked the shelter's decay. Cars lined the drive, polished sedans for Hale's allies, their hubcaps flashing like false smiles. The bikers parked at a respectful distance, engines off, the sudden silence amplifying the chirp of birds and the distant hum of a lawnmower. Knox dismounted, feeling the weight of eyes from the tree line. Security, no doubt, Hale's unseen enforcers. Sister Amelia clutched her satchel, the papers inside an arsenal of words. "Ready?" she asked, her voice a steady anchor. Knox met her gaze, Jake's promise echoing in his chest. For the forgotten. The group advanced, not as conquerors, but as bearers of light, flyers in hand, resolve etched in every step, tension coiled in the air, thick as the scent of blooming jasmine bordering the path. Whispers from the lodge carried on the wind, laughter, clinking glasses, the oblivious revelry of the guilty. But as the doors loomed, Knox sensed the shift, a moral tide turning, promises converging on the edge of confrontation. If this tale of quiet courage is touching your soul, drop a like below. It fuels the stories that remind us what honor looks like on the open road. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the lodge's manicured lawns, where dew still clung to the blades like fragile jewels. The air hummed with the low buzz of cicadas, undercut by the murmur of voices drifting from the open French doors, polished laughter, laced with the clink of crystal glasses. Knox led the way, his boots sinking slightly into the soft earth of the path, each step measured, deliberate, as if testing the ground for hidden traps. Sister Amelia walked beside him, her habit whispering against the grass, the satchel slung over her shoulder, a quiet testament to the truths it held. Behind them, Razor, Tank, and Lena moved in loose formation, flyers clutched in their fists, their presence a silent thunder rolling in from the horizon. Knox's heart thudded steadily, not with fear, but with the weight of echoes. Jake's voice in the wind, the oath that had survived foxholes and faded patches. The lodge loomed ahead, A grand edifice of timber and stone, its facade a mockery of rustic charm, while the town's underbelly starved. Security lingered at the edges. Two men in ill-fitting suits, their postures tense, eyes scanning the intruders like hawks spotting wolves. One stepped forward, hand raised, his voice carrying the false authority of a man bought and paid for. Private event. "Turn around, now!" Knox didn't break stride, his gaze fixed on the doors where silhouettes moved in oblivious revelry. "We're here to talk," he said, low and even, the words cutting through the morning haze like a blade. "About promises broken, funds stolen from those who need 'em most." The guard's eyes narrowed, flicking to Sister Amelia's habit, then to the biker's kutas, recognition dawning with a flicker of unease. He reached for his radio, but Razor's voice rumbled from the side, calm as an idling engine. "Easy, we're not here for trouble, just light." Sister Amelia stepped up, her voice soft yet unyielding, carrying the timbre of sermons delivered in storm-swept chapels. "Mayor Hale knows me. Tell him Sister Amelia has come with evidence, the kind that honors the forgotten." The guard hesitated, the radio crackling in his grip, then muttered into it. Moments stretched, taut as bowstrings, the group's breath mingling in the warming air. From inside the laughter faltered, a ripple spreading as heads turned toward the entrance. The doors swung open and Mayor Hale emerged, flanked by a cluster of suited cronies, silver-haired men with Rolexes glinting like false halos. Hale was a compact figure, his smile practiced, eyes sharp as a fox's, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed ill-gotten ease. The scent of expensive cologne wafted out, clashing with the earthy tang of the lawn. "Sister," he said, voice oily smooth, "what a surprise! And company." His gaze swept over Knox and the crew, lingering on the faded patches, with a mix of disdain and calculation. "This is a private fundraiser. For the community, of course." Sister Amelia met his eyes without flinching, her hand steady on the satchel. "Community? Like the shelter on Elm Street, where families huddle without heat because funds vanish into thin air." She pulled out a single sheet, the ledger page with his signature, and held it aloft, the paper catching the light like a banner. Murmurs swelled from the doorway, guests peering out, curiosity edging out their champagne haze. Knox felt the shift, the air thickening with unspoken accusations, the moral gravity pulling truths to the surface. Hale's smile tightened, a crack in the facade. "Allegations, sister, baseless. You've been warned before." He nodded to the guards, who advanced, but Knox moved forward, his frame blocking their path like a wall of weathered oak. "Warnings don't erase theft," Knox said, his voice gravel over steel, "or the clerk who vanished after seeing too much. We ride for promises, Mayor, ones that protect the weak, not bleed 'em dry." The words hung, drawing gasps from the crowd. Townfolk, donors, a few familiar faces from the shelter's fringes, their eyes widening with dawning recognition. Tank and Lena fanned out, handing flyers to the gathering onlookers, the papers whispering like fallen leaves in the breeze. "Read it," Lena urged a cluster of women in pearls, her tone steady, inviting. "This is your town, your neighbors suffering while pockets line." One guest, an elderly man with a veteran's limp, took a flyer, his face paling as he scanned the figures. This is my donation, meant for the VFW Hall." Whispers turned to questions, the lodge's polished calm fracturing like glass under pressure. Hale's face flushed, his cronies shifting uneasily, but he recovered with a forced chuckle. "Drama for the dramatic. Guards!" But Sister Amelia interrupted, her voice rising clear, carrying over the growing din. "No more shadows, Mayor. These good people deserve truth. The shelter closes next week unless justice prevails. I've carried this burden alone, but no longer." She distributed copies from her satchel, the pages passing hand to hand, igniting sparks of outrage. Knox watched, The scene unfolding like a slow reveal in the dawn light, Jake's oath manifesting in every furrowed brow, every shared glance. A commotion stirred at the edge, a young reporter, phone in hand, slipping through the crowd, her eyes alight with the scent of a story. "Mayor Hale, care to comment on these discrepancies?" Flashes popped, questions barraging like rain on tin. Hale backed toward the doors, his composure crumbling, barking orders that dissolved into chaos. The guards faltered, outnumbered by the swelling tide of guests turning accuser. Knox stood firm, not touching a soul, his presence an anchor of quiet resolve amid the storm. As the mayor retreated inside, the doors slamming shut behind him, Sister Amelia turned to Knox, her eyes shining with a mix of relief and fire. "You've given them the spark. The rest is theirs to fan." Razor clapped Knox's shoulder, the group's tension easing into a hard-won grin. But Knox's mind raced, shadows of doubt creeping in, the raid's ghosts whispering of backlash, of enforcers like those on the bus circling back. Tank scanned the perimeter, his prosthetic whirring softly. "We stirred the pot. Hale won't forget." Lena nodded, folding the last flyer. "Nor will they." She gestured to the crowd, now a murmur of determined voices, phones buzzing with shares and calls. The sun beat down warmer now, baking the revelations into the day's heat, the scent of jasmine turning cloying. Knox felt the pull of the road again, but deeper this time, a tether to the family he'd chosen, bound by promises that outlasted leather and chrome. They withdrew as sirens wailed in the distance, not threats, but echoes of accountability stirring. Mounting their bikes, engines growling to life, the convoy pulled away from the lodge, dust trailing like a victory banner. Milford's streets seemed brighter, the rot exposed to the light. Yet Knox knew the fight lingered, Hale's web tangled but unbroken. In his pocket, Jake's letter pressed like a heartbeat, reminding him that redemption rode on, one truthful mile at a time. The horizon beckoned, carrying them toward whatever shadows remained. Loyalty, their unyielding fuel. The engines faded into a distant rumble as the convoy threaded through Milford's back streets, the midday sun baking the asphalt into shimmering waves that distorted the air. Knox gripped the handlebars tighter, the leather of his gloves creaking under the strain, while the wind carried the faint, lingering bite of exhaust and scorched rubber. Behind him, the bikes formed a protective wedge, Razor's lead growl, Tank's steady thump, Lena's precise hum, flanking Sister Amelia in the sidecar. Her habit now dusted with the road's fine grit. The lodge receded in the mirrors, a hulking silhouette swallowed by the haze, but Knox could still hear the echoes. The sharp intake of breaths from the crowd, the rustle of papers igniting fury, Hale's retreating footsteps thudding like a defeated pulse. They veered toward the shelter on Elm Street, the logical anchor in the swelling storm. The town stirred around them, sidewalks filling with pedestrians who paused mid-stride, eyes tracking the riders with a mix of awe and whispered speculation. Word traveled fast in places like Milford, faster than the dust devils spinning in empty lots. Knox's mind replayed the confrontation, Hale's oily facade cracking under the weight of truth, the reporter's questions slicing through like revved throttles. It was a victory, small but seismic, yet doubt coiled in his gut like overheated oil. Promises kept came with prices. Jake's death had taught him that, and Hale's kind didn't slink away quietly. They struck from the shadows. The shelter came into view, its brick walls bathed in harsh light, the chain-link fence casting long, jagged stripes across the ground. As they pulled into the lot, engines cutting to a hush, Maria the volunteer burst through the door, her face flushed, apron smeared with what smelled like reheated stew. "Sister, you won't believe, the phones haven't stopped. Folks from the lodge calling about the flyers. One donor's already wiring funds for the heat." Her voice trembled with rare joy, hands twisting a dish rag as if wringing out years of frustration. Inside, The common room buzzed, families clustering around a battered radio, voices overlapping in a tapestry of hope and anger. The air hung heavy with the aroma of boiling potatoes and fresh brewed tea, a stark contrast to the diner's stale coffee from hours before. Sister Amelia dismounted gracefully, her boots touching gravel with a soft crunch. "Grace moves quickly when truth leads," she said, smiling at Maria before turning to the group. Knox lingered by his bike, wiping sweat from his brow with a forearm scarred from old shrapnel. The boy's face from earlier flashed in his memory, the wide eyes fixed on a vanished playground, stirring the oath deeper. Razor joined him, lighting a cigarette. The flame flickering in the breeze that rustled the cottonwoods overhead. "Stirred the hive good, brother, but Hale's buzzing back. Heard on the scanner. Cops circling the lodge, but not for him. For us, maybe." Knox nodded, scanning the street where a patrol car idled at the corner, its occupant watching with idle suspicion. The sun beat down, turning the fence's barbs into glinting threats. "We exposed the rot. That's the ride Jake would have wanted." Yet as he spoke, his phone vibrated, a blocked number, the screen glowing like a warning flare. He answered, stepping away from the group, the shelter's murmurs fading behind him. "Ward." The voice on the other end was smooth, laced with false warmth, the scarred man from the bus, his breath carrying the faint echo of whiskey even through the line. "Big man, you and your nun friend made quite the show. Mayor sends regards, says it's time to chat. Alone. Old warehouse on the edge of town, sunset. Or those shelter folks. They might find their doors locked for good." The threat hung, veiled but sharp, the kind that preyed on the vulnerable without raising a fist. Knox's jaw clenched, the phone creaking in his grip. "Tell Hale promises cut both ways. I show, you back off the forgotten." A chuckle slithered through the speaker, low and mocking. "Sunset. Don't be late." The line died, leaving Knox with the sun's relentless glare and the distant wail of a siren threading through the town. He pocketed the phone and returned to the group, where Sister Amelia was distributing water bottles to the children, her laughter light as she knelt among them. Lena caught his eye first, her mechanic's intuition picking up the shift in his stance. "Trouble?" she asked quietly, leaning against Tank's bike, the metal warm under her palm. Knox recounted the call, his voice a gravel murmur that blended with the rustle of leaves. Razor exhaled smoke, grinding the butt under his boot. "Trap plane! Hale's testing, wants you isolated, scare off the crew." Tank's prosthetic whirred as he crossed his arms, the sound like a mechanical sigh. "We ride with you. No lone wolf crap." Sister Amelia approached, her expression serene yet edged with steel, the satchel now lighter after sharing copies of the evidence. "This is the Shadow's last grasp, Mr. Ward. I've faced men like Hale before, in boardrooms, not buses. But division is their weapon. Stand together, and truth holds." Knox met her gaze, feeling Jake's letter press against his chest like a talisman. The shelter's door swung open again, admitting a stream of locals drawn by the radio reports, faces etched with the wear of hard lives, but eyes alight with purpose. A veteran from the corner game earlier limped forward, gripping Knox's arm with a grip born of shared scars. "Heard what you did at the lodge. My checks bounced last month. Hale's doing. If you're facing him down, count me in. We vets stick for our own." The words rippled outward, more voices joining, a chorus of the overlooked, their footsteps crunching gravel as they formed a loose circle around the bikes. The air thickened with resolve, scented by the faint ozone of an approaching thunderhead rolling in from the Badlands. Knox felt the weight lift slightly, the family's chosen web tightening against the fray. "Sunset then," he said, mounting his iron head with a nod. "But not alone. We ride as one." "Mine." As the group prepared, engines coughing awake in prelude, Knox glanced at the horizon, where the sun dipped toward the jagged peaks, casting Milford in elongated shadows. The warehouse loomed in his mind, a derelict husk on the outskirts, its rusted walls echoing with potential confrontation. Hale's enforcers would be there, backed by badges or bluster, but Knox sensed the turning. The town's awakening, the promises converging like storm clouds. Loyalty wasn't a chain anymore. It was the fuel propelling them forward into the gathering dusk, where redemption waited, fierce and unyielding. The convoy reformed, a low roar building as they pulled out, weaving through streets now alive with whispers of change. Sister Amelia rode steady, her hand resting on the sidecar's edge, while Knox led, the road unspooling like a challenge accepted. Thunder rumbled faintly, the first drops pattering on helmets like hesitant applause. In that moment, with the shelter shrinking in the mirrors and the unknown racing to meet them, Knox understood. The fight for honor wasn't won in grand clashes, but in the quiet choice to stand, again and again, for those the world forgot. The miles blurred, carrying them towards sunset's edge, where shadows would break or bind. The sun hung low on the horizon, a bloated orange orb bleeding into the Badlands, casting the old warehouse in a fiery glow that turned its rusted corrugated walls into a canvas of molten rust. The air was thick, heavy with the metallic tang of impending rain and the faint, oily residue of long-abandoned machinery. Knox throttled down his iron head as the convoy pulled into the weed-choked lot, engines growling to a reluctant hush, their echoes bouncing off the skeletal frames of derelict silos. Gravel crunched under tires, kicking up dust that swirled like ghosts in the dying light. Sister Amelia dismounted from the sidecar, her habit dusted with the day's miles, eyes steady as she scanned the shadowed entrance. The crew fanned out, Razor to the left, Tank and Lena to the right, their boots thudding softly on the cracked concrete, flyers and evidence tucked into pockets like hidden ammunition. Knox led the way, his broad frame cutting through the twilight like a prow, the weight of Jake's letter a steady pressure against his chest. The warehouse loomed, its yawning doors ajar, spilling faint yellow light from within, lanterns or bulbs strung haphazardly, illuminating stacks of forgotten crates and the glint of parked sedans half hidden in the gloom. The scarred man from the bus waited at the threshold, flanked by two others. The burly tattooed enforcer and a new face, slick in a cheap suit, his tie askew like a noose half-tied. No badges in sight, but Knox smelled the corruption, sharp as exhaust fumes. "You brought a parade," the scarred man sneered, his voice echoing hollowly, arms crossed over his chest. "Hale said alone. Guess bikers don't listen." Knox stopped a few paces out, the group halting behind him in a loose semicircle, their presence a wall of leather and resolve. The wind picked up, whispering through the chain-link gaps, carrying the distant rumble of thunder that mirrored the tension coiling in his gut. "We listen to promises," Knox replied, low and even, his gaze pinning the man like a spotlight in the dusk. "The ones that protect the weak. Hale's game ends tonight. No more threats to shelters, no more vanished clerks." Sister Amelia stepped forward slightly, her satchel open, a sheaf of papers ready. The air between them crackled, not with violence, but with the unspoken power of truths poised to shatter illusions. From the shadows inside, Hale emerged. His tailored suit rumpled now, face pale under the harsh light, the mayor's polish chipped like flaking paint. He held a briefcase, its leather scuffed as if he'd been pacing in frantic circles. "Enough, theatre!" Hale snapped, his voice thinner than on the lodge steps, edged with desperation. "You think flyers and sob stories topple anything? This town's mine. Funds flow where power dictates." But his eyes darted to the crew, the growing circle of locals who'd trailed from the shelter. Veterans with canes and glares, mothers clutching children's hands, Maria from Hope Haven with a cluster of residents. Word had spread like wildfire through Milford's veins, drawing them here on foot and in battered trucks, their footsteps a quiet drumbeat, joining the fray. The reporter from the lodge was there too, phone raised, capturing the scene in live streams that buzzed across social feeds. Sister Amelia held up the ledger, her voice clear as a bell, tolling in the storm. Power built on stolen hope crumbles, Mayor. These papers, your signatures, the diverted funds, now in hands beyond your reach. The bishops reviewing them, the state auditor's been tipped. Even your donors are turning. Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd, the scent of wet earth rising as the first raindrops pattered down, spotting the concrete like tears. Hale's enforcers shifted uneasily, the scarred man's sneer faltering as Tank's massive form loomed closer, not advancing but unyielding. Lena distributed more copies, her movements precise, voices murmuring agreements that swelled into a chorus. "We saw the shelter," a veteran called out, his voice gravelly from years of smoke and silence. "My brother's benefits, gone. For what? Your lodge?" Hale's briefcase trembled in his grip, the lock clicking open to reveal stacks of cash, hastily bundled, a desperate bribe or flight fund. "This is business," he stammered, but the words rang hollow, drowned by the rain's steady hiss now drumming on the warehouse roof. Knox stepped closer, rain streaking his face, mixing with the sweat of the long day. "Business that killed dreams, like it did my brother, supplies cut. Lives lost to greed. Jake's promise was to stand for folks like these. We're keeping it." The words landed heavy, stirring nods from the vets, a ripple of shared grief cutting through the downpour. Razor's hand rested on Knox's shoulder, a silent anchor, while Sister Amelia placed a gentle hand on Hale's arm, not in judgment but invitation. "Repentance starts with truth, Mayor. Hand it over. Let justice heal what you've broken." The scarred man lunged forward, fist raised, but Tank intercepted with a forearm block, the prosthetic gleaming wet under the lanterns, holding him without harm. "Easy," Tank rumbled, voice like thunder rolling closer. "Fight's over. Crowd's the judge now." Hale's eyes widened, the reality crashing down, the phones filming, the locals encircling. The rain washing away his veneer. With a defeated slump, he shoved the briefcase toward Sister Amelia, cash spilling like confetti in the mud. "Take it. Just make it stop." Sirens wailed in the distance, not for them, but drawn by the live feeds, blue lights flickering over the hills like approaching dawn. As Hale and his men were led away by arriving officers, ones not on the payroll, faces stern with newfound accountability, the rain eased to a drizzle, the air freshened with petrichor and release. The crowd dispersed slowly, voices buzzing with plans, funds returned, shelter rebuilt, a town council reformed. Knox watched from under the warehouse eave, water dripping from his jacket, the weight in his chest lifting like fog burned off by morning sun. Sister Amelia approached, her habit sodden but spirit unbroken, handing him a single recovered bill as a token. "You fulfilled more than one promise today, Mr. Ward. Jake would be proud." Knox folded it into his pocket beside the letter, the paper now companions in redemption. Razor clapped his back, the crew gathering close, engines idling in the lot like patient guardians. "Ride's not over, brother. But this leg, honored." They mounted up, the convoy roaring to life once more, headlights piercing the twilight as they carved back toward the heart of Milford. The warehouse shrank in the mirrors, a husk shed like old skin, while the road ahead gleamed with possibility, promises kept, family chosen, honor reclaimed in the quiet thunder of loyalty. For the forgotten, the wheel turned, carrying light into the shadows. Thank you for riding this road with us. If stories of unbreakable promises and chosen families stir your heart, hit that subscribe button. We'll keep the tales coming 1 mile at a time.